general political culture is a bicameral national Congress, with the Senate comprising 128 members elected for 6-year terms, and the Chamber of Deputies comprising of 500 members elected for 3-year terms. Members are not allowed to serve consecutive terms. Does this ring a bell?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now let's go into some detail about the legislature. Like the U.S. counterpart, the Senate represents the states. It has 128 members, with 4 coming from each of the 31 states and 4 from the Federal District of Mexico. Senators serve 6-year terms and all run for re-election at the same time as the president. A system of staggered elections was introduced in 1991, but was suspended in 1993. The PRI had a monopoly of Senate seats until 1976, when the Popular Socialist Party was given a seat in return for keeping quiet about fraud in state election in another part of the country. In 1988, the opposition Cardenas Front won 4 Senate seats, and in 1993, electoral reforms not only increased the number of seats in the Senate from 64 to 128, but also changed the electoral process so that the biggest party in every state won 3 seats, and the second biggest won the 4th. Hence, the 1994 elections saw 32 opposition senators elected, and the 1997 elections saw 51 elected. And in 2000s, elections saw 68 elected, and PRI losing the majority for the first time.
What about the other half of the legislature, the Chamber of Deputies? Like the U.S. House of Representatives, the Chamber of Deputies represents the people rather than the states. Its 500 members are elected to 3-year terms through a universal vote. As for the Senate, the PRI once had a lock on the chamber, which until 1977 had 320 members. 300 elected from single-member districts that the PRI was virtually guaranteed to win, and 20 elected from party lists by proportional representation, giving other parties a chance for seats in Congress. To give those parties greater representation, the PRI increased the number of party elections, so opposition parties won few of the single-member seats, but won almost all the party list seats. This gave them 48% of the seats in the chamber, enough at least to temporarily meet their demands for government influence, and deny the PRI the two-thirds majority they needed to amend the Constitution. Their share of seats fell in 1991, but they won the majority in 1997 and 2000, obliging PRI to reach more accommodations with the opposition parties in order to move business along. The final branch is the judiciary branch, and that's including the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has 11 members, including the Chief Justice, each appointed for 15-year terms. Just like here in the United States, members are nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate, but unlike the United States, where only Congress can impeach a justice to the Supreme Court, the Mexican President has the power to do that also. Below the Supreme Court, there's a system of circuit courts of appeal and district courts of the first instance. The Supreme Court appoints circuit and district judges for renewable 4-year terms. And yeah, that's about it about the Supreme Court.
Why don't you guys tell me a little bit about your president, Vicente Fox?
Yeah, Vicente Fox is a pretty cool guy. He's the first non-PRI candidate to win in 71 years. And he's part of the PAN party, which has become pretty powerful in Mexico these days. He was educated at a Catholic university in Mexico City, and he worked for Coca-Cola prior to his political career. He was first elected to the Chamber of Deputies in 1988, and he would have become a governor in 1991 if the votes had been counted correctly, but he was pretty much cheated out of that. He's been described as charismatic and controversial, even called one of his opponents a transvestite and a sissy, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, that's pretty much all. Oh yeah, I just remembered something. He had a lot of support when he first became president, but he's lost a lot of that support because of a belief that he wanted his wife to succeed him, and a lot of people don't want a woman to be president.
You know, Vicente Fox's term is almost over. That means in a few years, he won't be allowed to run for any more political events because the president can only be allowed into the political arena once. After that, he's not allowed to do anything.
Actually, that's called the principle of non-reelection. and that exists on all levels of politics. So basically, once the sesenia, the 6-year term, is over, there's inexperience at every level of the government.
So, do you want to tell me some more about the president?
Not really. Okay. The president has a lot of power in Mexico because the Constitution gave him all that power. And he gets even more power just because traditionally he'll rough you up if you don't do what he tells you. Let's see, what else is there? The first 2 years of a presidential term are usually just he's picking all his people he wants to govern, because with the principle of non-election he can't have anyone with experience. He's got to figure out who he wants. The next 2 years are the governing, and he does everything he wants. Then the last 2 are he picks his successor, who traditionally will automatically win the next election.
Hold that thought. Wake up.
Just some other things about Fox. He's considered moderately conservative by most people, and his priorities included reforming the bureaucracy, amending the Constitution, championing the rights of the indigenous people of Mexico, and resolving the conflict in the Chiapas. Initially, he had a lot of support for his first budget, but now he's lost a lot of that because of his tax reform and inability to get rights for detained Mexicans in the United States.
I can understand why you guys would want to leave Mexico. Mexico has some serious problems, including corruption, crime, and poverty. The organization of police forces in Mexico is complex. Each police force has a different level of jurisdiction and authority, and those levels sometimes overlap. Because of this overlapping, pay is generally poor, and police officers are most likely to accept bribes to protect criminals and ignore crime entirely. Corruption plagues the various levels of police in Mexico, and is so frequent that it is difficult to track down and prosecute, since police officers may be protected by district attorneys and other members of the judiciary. The problem is especially pronounced in border areas, such as Tijuana, where police are engaged by drug traffickers to protect and enforce.